Hola, estudiantes. All right, buckle your seatbelt and get out some paper because this is probably, in my opinion, the hardest part about the subjunctive. We already went over the regular verbs and how to form those. We went over the irregular verbs, the 6 you have to memorize. This list that I'm going to give you today are some stem changing verbs. So hopefully you'll recognize some patterns and be able to see how we stem change verbs in the subjunctive in general. So let's start by writing down these 3 verbs. In the present subjunctive, stem changing AR and ER verbs, that part is very important. Stem changing AR and ER verbs have the stem change in all forms except nosotros and vosotros. So if it's a stem changing verb and it ends in AR or ER, it's going to be a boot verb. And we can think of these in a few different categories: U to UE and E to IE. So here's the verbs jugar, pensar y entender. Jugar to play, pensar to think, y entender to understand. So you see the pattern here. The U is going to UE inside of the boot, and it is staying as a U outside of the boot. The E is changing to an IE in the boot and staying as an E outside of the boot. And the same thing here. The E is changing to an IE in the boot and staying as an E outside of the boot. Now, there are lots of other verbs you know that follow these patterns. So there's lots of verbs that go from O to UE. So just like jugar goes from U to UE, all of the verbs on this list also go from O to UE. So all these O's will change to UE inside of the boot. Let me show you some conjugations. So here's the verb contar, to count or to tell, like to tell a story or to tell jokes. So you see how the O is changing to a UE inside of the boot and staying as an O outside. Poder, same thing. O is changing to a UE inside the boot and staying as an O outside of the boot. Volver, same thing. Changing from an O to a UE inside of the boot and staying as an O outside of the boot. Costar, O to UE in the boot and stays as an O outside of the boot. Probar, O to UE in the boot, stays as an O outside of the boot. Llover, O to UE. Now, I hope you know why I only included this form in the verb chart. Why do you think I can only conjugate llover in the usted a leer form? Yep, because there's only one thing that can rain, it. It rains. I can't say I rain or you rain. Only it can rain. And then doler, O to UE, inside the boot, and it stays as an O outside of the boot. Now, all of those verbs that we just saw follow the same pattern as jugar. Now I want to look at some verbs that follow the same pattern as pensar and entender. And they are the verbs on this list. They all go from E to IE. So E will go to IE, E will go to IE, E will go to IE. Oh, watch out. This E, second E, guys, will go to IE. E will go to IE. E will go to IE. Let's look at those conjugations. All right, querer. We have E going to IE inside of the boot. Sentar, same thing. E goes to IE inside of the boot, stays as an E outside of the boot. Calentar. E goes to IE inside of the boot and stays as an E outside of the boot. Despertar y despertarse. This E goes to IE inside of the boot and stays as an E outside of the boot. Empezar. E goes to IE inside of the boot and stays as an E outside of the boot. I hope you're seeing the pattern. Entender. E goes to IE inside the boot and stays as an E outside of the boot. Now, something that these verbs have in common. They all end in AR or ER. So in the subjunctive, again, stem changing verbs that end in AR or ER are boot verbs. But there's another set of verbs. What ending is missing? Yeah, the IR verbs, right? So the IR stem changing verbs are different. Verbs that end in IR have stem changing forms in all of the boxes. And they're a little weird. So this set I want to look at in great detail with you. There's 3 changes we'll see. E to IE, O to UE, oh, I skipped one, and E to I. All right, so here's a couple of examples. Sentirse, you can see how the E went to IE in the boot. And look at this. It also made a change outside of the boot, but the change was an I. That's what happens with E to IE verbs, and we'll look at some more in a moment. The next category is E to I verbs. This one's a little easier. The E is going to go to an I in all 6 forms. And then the last category we're going to look at is O to UE. This one reminds me of E to IE. All 6 forms change, O to UE, inside the boot. And then outside of the boot, there is a change, but it's O to U. So I want to look at some other verbs that follow this same pattern. So verbs that follow the same pattern of E to IE, so that means they follow the same pattern as sentirse, are the verbs divertirse y preferir. Let's look at those conjugations. So divertirse and preferir, this E is going to go to an IE inside of the boot. And then outside of the boot, the E is going to go to just an I. The same for preferir, and by the way, it's the second E, if you need to mark that. E goes to IE inside of the boot. And outside of the boot, E goes to I, just I. So divertirse and preferir follow the same pattern as sentirse. Now let's look at some verbs that look like pedir. Pedir goes from E to I, and so do these verbs. Now reír is a little extra special because it has an accent, so we're going to keep that accent. So E goes to I in all the forms, including inside of the boot, but there's a little change, no accent. Repetir, second E, goes to I in all of the forms, including outside of the boot. Servir, E goes to I in all of the forms, including outside of the boot. These two verbs are nearly identical, seguir and conseguir. E goes to I in all of the forms, including outside of the boot. And conseguir is going to conjugate, of course, identically to seguir, just with a con added on to the front. And then the last category, the O to UE, is going to work just like dormir. It's the verb morir. So those are in the same category. They conjugate the same way. O goes to UE inside of the boot. And then just like dormir, O goes to U outside of the boot. All right, so that lesson was a little trickier. I hope you took good notes. Feel free to go back and watch this video again and pause if I went too fast. I'll see you tomorrow in class. Ciao.